Welcome to Exploring Computing. Today's video is additional Python features. So in this video, we're going to take a look at a few other Python language features that you might find handy in certain situations. So the first one I wanted to talk about is how to do a multi-line statement. So sometimes you have a line of code that's just too long to fit on a single line comfortably. And in some languages, you can just go ahead and split across the line. You can just say, this doesn't fit on the line. I'm going to go ahead and put a carriage return in the middle. The language interpreter should figure this out. And it turns out this does not work in Python. So if you do what I've done here, where I've taken name equals and I put in a carriage return there, and then I follow it on the next line with input, this is actually going to cause an error when you try and load it. So that's no good. So there's several solutions to this. The one that's universally going to be doable is you can go ahead and put a backslash at the end of your unfinished line. So if I say name equals, and then I have that backslash, don't use the forward slash, it's got to be backslash. You got that backslash, that tells Python, I'm not really done with the line. Go to the next line. That's actually a continuation of the current line. In addition, you can use parentheses. So if you've already got parentheses, if you've got like that input statement there, I can go ahead and use the parentheses for the input statement. You can also, in many situations, like if we've got a mathematical formula, you can just put in parentheses wherever you want. But if you've got an open parentheses, like here where I've got that input and then open parentheses, Python immediately realizes that it doesn't see a closing parentheses on that current line. So I must be spreading my statement across multiple lines, and it will go ahead and continue processing lines, the subsequent lines, as if they were part of the original line until it sees that closing parenthesis. You can do the same thing with the square brackets. So if you've got a list of items like I've got here, it sees that opening square bracket. It sees a bunch of people on our team member list. It doesn't see a closing square bracket. It says, you must want me to continue processing the next line and the next line until I see that closing angular bracket. All right, another issue that sometimes comes up is how to do what's called concatenating strings. In computer science, concatenating strings means to combine two strings into a single string. And there's a variety of different ways to do this depending upon the programming language. In Python, you just separate the strings by space and it automatically puts them together. So if I say hello space everyone, it's going to combine that together into a single string, hello everyone. Notice that it does not actually add a space into the hello everyone. So I get hello everyone. So if you want a space, either the hello string needs to end with a space or the everyone string needs to start with a space, or you need to put in a third in the middle, a quote with a space with a closing quote in between the hello and the everyone, and that will combine to get you hello space everyone. This can be useful when we have a really long string. So here I'm using the Stanford motto. I'm not going to attempt to read it. I don't know German at all. The Stanford motto, blah, 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 translates as the wind of freedom blows. And so maybe that's a little bit too long to fit on a single line. I want to put it across multiple lines. And I'm going to do that by breaking it down into individual strings. Notice each of these strings, at least the first three strings, ends with a space, so translates as space. The Stanford motto, space dash space, because remember, if we don't put those spaces in there, when this string gets combined back together, we're not going to have spaces, so don't forget your spaces. You may also notice that I don't have closing backslashes on the end of each of these lines, and that's because I've got that print statement. So I've got the print parentheses, and so that immediately tells Python that it should continue processing each of the following lines as if they were on the same line until it hits that closing parenthesis. You can also use triple quotes for this. So if you've got a long string and you don't want to bother putting quotes around all of them and you want it to go across multiple lines, you can just put a triple quote at the start and then a triple quote at the end, and this will also work. Okay, the last thing I wanted to mention in our short little video on additional Python features is how you write a comment in Python. And so you recall that a comment is used when we want to convey information to other humans who are reading our code, but we want it to be ignored by the computer. So here, the number sign is used by Python and for comments. And when Python sees a number sign, it ignores everything following the number sign until the end of the line. That's considered a comment. The Python thinks, oh, that's something for human beings. I'm not a human being, so I'm going to go ahead and ignore it. Here we've got a number sign, defined variables. So that whole line, it starts with the number sign. So that whole line is just going to get completely ignored by the computer. The computer is just going to be like, oh, this must be something that Patrick wants for other people reading the code to know, but I'm not a person, I'm a computer. I'm better than a person, I'm a computer. So I'm going to just ignore that line. So it completely ignores that first line. And then the next line, total equals 0, number sign, total number of students is initially 0. It is going to process the total equals 0. That's not behind a number sign. But then as soon as it sees that number sign, it says, oh, the rest of this line, that's for humans. I'm going to go ahead and ignore it. So this whole thing, number sign defined variables, total equals 0, number sign, total number of students is initially 0, is going to get treated by the computer as just total equals 0. All right, that's it for today. We've got one more lecture on Python programming. I'll see you soon.